Good to be with you as always. It's the On Friar podcast brought to you by NBC7. I am Darnay Tripp. He is Derek Togerson. And Derek, I feel like we haven't really had a chance to connect since things went down with this team. It was like a week and a half ago, which in Padres world can be a long period of time. So good to be with you again. And I'm very anxious to get your thoughts on what we've heard and what we've learned over the course of the last couple of weeks, as well as some other baseball topics.
Yeah, and you as well. It's been a little bit, kind of let this sink in, let it marinate a little bit so we can formulate our overreactions, which I'm sure we all have.
We all have. So I wanted to get into that. Perhaps touch on the Dodgers doing Dodger October things and how we process that here in a Padres town. And there's also been these discussions, and I'm curious your take on them as an experienced clubhouse and locker room reporter about journalistic integrity in the clubhouse setting and what can and cannot be reported because of something that's happened in the Braves-Phillies series. So
that's attaboy Harper.
Yeah, that attaboy Harper. Yes. When you're in that room and the reporters are there, that's kind of not really on us, but we will launch into that as well. First things first, thanks to OG's sponsor the On Fire podcast. For over 30 years, OG's has been crafting award-winning microbrews with over 60 medals in international, national, and regional competitions. OG's is one of the most decorated breweries in the world, with each OG's location having 12 proprietary OG's beers on tap. They are constantly refreshing their menu as they did this year. You can also take advantage of OG's loyalty program. It's super easy. You can do it online, earn loyalty points, rewards, and exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And ordering online from OG's is easier than ever. You can get OG's straight to your door. So thanks to OG's for all they do for the On Fire podcast and the NBC7 sports team. Without further ado, the walk-up music. Feels like it's been a bit of a slow week, Derek. There's been so much just talk and chatter and intrigue and what's going to happen and this and that. And dust has kind of settled in the last week or so, but things are still very much happening in the baseball world. Just ask the Los Angeles Dodgers.
It's not happening for them anymore.
It's not happening for them anymore. So a great October tradition continues, which obviously the Padres were instrumental in a year ago. So yeah, a little bit more going on in kind of like the non-San Diego baseball world, but obviously I think just kind of this team and where things stand and looking ahead, always a topic that gets people's interest. And I thought about doing it today and I was like, let's wait for another week, because I think doing the who should stay, who should go conversation, we should probably dedicate a full pod to that.
No question.
Next week or two while things are still kind of fresh, but before the offseason wheels really start turning. But I figured this was an opportunity to kind of talk about other things that are going on, but also just kind of circle back on what we learned last week with the gang staying together, Padres essentially running it back. Todd Strain and I did an episode Wednesday after we heard from AJ Preller. If you hadn't had a chance to check that out, our kind of initial reactions to what we heard. But then things happened after that, with Bob Melvin telling reporters, yes, I am actually coming back, even though there was some ambiguity from what we heard from AJ Preller. But yeah, that is happening. And then, as you said, we've had a chance to kind of let things marinate. Having had 8 days to let it settle in. How you feel about everything?
And I think ambiguity is probably the best way of putting it, because we don't know. We know AJ Preller is back with the team in some capacity, but he also did hint at, I am open to bringing in a general manager, somebody to work underneath him, which is something that I have been talking about now for the last, week or so, 2 weeks, that maybe he needs to be a guy who was more in charge of the baseball operation side and finding the talent and all that. Let somebody else build the roster, because the roster hasn't been, put together in all that great a way. I think that would be probably a win-win. You keep a guy who's obviously one of the best talent evaluators in all of Major League Baseball in the system, and you bring in somebody who might be able to put together more of a cohesive unit when it comes to the on-field product. I'd be all in on that. Bob Melvin, He's going to be back as of now, but it also did not rule out the possibility of him talking to a team like the Dodgers. It did not rule out the possibility of him going into next year as a lame duck manager, which is not unprecedented, but very rare. Nobody goes into the last year of a contract like this. It doesn't happen very often. And AJ said, we're not going to, talk about any kind of contract extensions that may or may not be being discussed at the moment, which usually is not what AJ would say. When he was talking about Blake Snell, of course there's interest in having Blake Snell back. Of course, he's going to be a free agent. But he didn't say the same kind of thing about Bob Melvin. He didn't say, of course there's interest in having him extend. That was never discussed. And that's kind of the way AJ is usually talked about those things in those types of terms. So it's, again, kind of a lot of things that we think maybe kind of settled, but we don't know how they're going to then settle in the future moving forward. So it's a lot of weirdness, man. It's a lot of weirdness. And one thing that I guess kind of surprised me, but also didn't about what AJ said was when he was asked about, and AJ Cassavell asked him flat out, would you consider trading Juan Soto? And AJ's response was, he's an incredible offensive player. We're not a franchise that's ever said no to anything, which is the right way to go about things. But then when you apply that context to the way that AJ has worked in the past, and this franchise has worked in off seasons in the past, you got to figure it's not just we never say no to anything. It's you know what? If someone gives us a Godfather offer, we will make that deal. So it's going to be, as we all know, AJ hates boring off seasons. And something tells me we're going to have anything but a boring off season.
AJ hates boring off seasons, but he doesn't necessarily hate boring press availabilities. They're not always the most interesting and insightful. And I think, there was such an opportunity to, open up and be a little bit more forthcoming about things. And that wasn't really the case. And there was a lot of, we were kind of forced to read between the lines and a lot of things, like you did with Juan Soto, like we did with Bob Melvin and all that. Even the Snell and Hader stuff, it's like, okay, that's the answer you have to give. But saying that, yeah, you're going to sit down with Blake Snell and Scott Boras and make him an offer and all that, chances are you're going to make him an offer and then be like, we could probably get a whole lot more than that somewhere else. Thanks. It's been enjoyable, 3 seasons, and best luck going forward. So he's not being dishonest, but how much confidence is there that they're going to be able to hammer something out? The Melvin stuff, yeah, I mean, he can say that now, and Bob Melvin seems like a fairly straightforward guy, but again, different situation from the Juan Soto and Godfather offer. But if there's a team and an offer is made and it makes sense, maybe they both decide, okay, this is a way to kind of cut our losses, so to speak, go our separate ways, and the Padres can start over with another new manager and maybe have a little bit more, as much as the Padres can have stability with a manager, have some stability beyond this year going forward. And, and I wonder and I've wondered all season about the optics of firing Bob Melvin. That would avoid them having to deal with any negative optics from that standpoint, because he's so well respected, and
it takes away from you being the bad guy. Right.
Yeah. And so, even them going down this path where he's back for 2024 and they write out his contract and they're like, hey, thanks, it's been a good few years. Hopefully they finish strong. But that gives them an opportunity to kind of just break it clean and go in whatever direction AJ Preller and company decide to go.
And they're talking about internal candidates. You're talking about, well, first of all, if it is the Giants or anybody else, there has to be a compensation package. Remember, the A's didn't ask for anything in return for Bob Melvin. I think they did him a solid because he was there for so long and dealt with so many low payrolls and won them so many games. They were like, dude, go. We owe you this, you earn this, go. The Padres would not do that. They would ask for something in return. So it's some kind of a trade. I honestly don't even know what that would be. If it's a player to be named later, if it's draft pick compensation, if it's cash, I don't know what the deal with that would be, but something would be coming back. So the other team also has to weigh the importance of having Bob Melvin as a manager versus what they have to give up. Now, I would say that Bo Mel is probably more important than that. But then the other question is, does Mike Schilt take over? Does Matt Williams take over? Does Ryan Flaherty, a guy who they think is a rising coaching star? Remember, they denied the Mets the opportunity to interview Ryan Flaherty for a bench coach job, so they want to keep him in the pipeline. Who becomes the skipper now? If you're looking at mostly internal options, it's And are any of them going to be better than Bob Melvin? I mean, he's universally respected by players, coaches around Major League Baseball. See, the only person I've ever heard of him not getting along with is his current general manager, which is kind of weird to say. So I don't know. I'm hoping nothing changes there just because Bo Mel is so good. And I honestly think he's one World Series appearance away from solidifying his spot in Cooperstown. I would love to see it happen for him here because I really believe that he's the right guy to lead literally any clubhouse.
Yes, I would think Matt Williams would probably go with Bob Melvin wherever he goes.
His health issues and he's had to deal with lately, it probably would not make him want to put up with the strain and stress of being a manager and all the things that come along with it.
And he came with, Melvin, it's not like Niebla and Flaherty that were here beforehand. Although, I mean, it seems like he and Niebla have a good working relationship. It's so weird that we're even having these conversations after the manager said, I'll be back in 2024. But it just kind of speaks to like the instability of things here and just kind of the overall environment, which just constantly leaves you guessing and searching for answers and all that. Meant to mention, if you are watching on YouTube, get in the chat, let us know what you think. We'll get to your comments in the episode. One thing that I thought was, like, I was at their presser at the end of last year after the NLCS, and it was Bob sitting on the dais right next to AJ Preller, those two together. It's not the case this year. Now I believe Kevin Acee reported that Melvin was like moving his offseason home or had some personal matter he was attending to on that day. But
you can Zoom from anywhere on Earth.
You can Zoom from anywhere or on Earth, or you can say, "Oh, you're busy on Wednesday, Bob. Let's just do it on Thursday." You know what I mean? And I have a tough time getting past it just being AJ Preller on the Zoom. Are we not going to hear from Bob Melvin at all? Like, really get an opportunity to ask? I know, granted, he spoke to AC, spoke to Bernie Wilson, but kind of in that open press scrum setting. Are we not going to get that this year? And when there seems to be kind of a lack of cohesion between these two gentlemen and some maybe disagreements in how things should work and how things have gone down, I think not having them together where they're both able to answer those questions speaks to that a little bit. And again, as we kind of read between the lines, I can't help but think like, oh yeah, these guys, like, maybe there's just not that like comfort level that like, yeah, we can stare down the bullets together and it's not going to get weird.
And you got to, if they do it together, the questions go to both of them at the same time. And then if they answer differently in that setting, it looks really bad.
Yeah.
So maybe it's simply a preemptive strike,
I guess, but yeah, it's just not good. You don't want that, right? That's not great. I think what I've settled on, again, having a chance to let this marinate, is that like so much for the thorough assessment. Like, I just don't. Maybe there could be a lot more going on behind the scenes that, obviously we don't know about. But just based on what we've seen and heard, it doesn't make you think that like a whole lot went into that thorough assessment, because A, they're running it back, and B, there was no, yes, these were the lessons we learned. This is how we need to change. This is how we need to be on the same page. These are, because even if you run it back, you can be like, okay, there were some important lessons, there were some hard conversations, and this is what we're going to do going forward. We didn't even get that. And so I just feel like whatever the dynamics were, whatever all that was this year, like, as far as we stand right here at this moment, there's nothing that makes you believe that it's going to be any different going forward.
The one thing AJ said about that was, we'll learn from this year and we'll be better for it. But he didn't specify what exactly it is they have learned or are going to learn from this year, and how they're going to make those improvements once they identify what the major problem here was. Because you can't fix something if you don't know what you're trying to fix. You can't, if you're leaking in their bathroom, you can't go straight to the bathtub if it's under the sink. You got to figure out where the problem is to be able to fix the problem. So until they figure out what exactly it is, and honestly, and this is really crappy to say,
I can't wait,
but I don't know how much the Padres and then the front office really wants to figure out what went wrong, or honestly believes there is something tangible that they've done that can lead to this. Because if you look at, the luck stat on Baseball Reference, and it's -10, and only 4 other teams in the last 30 years have been as unlucky as the Padres have this year. I think they look at that, and AJ even alluded to this too. Like, everybody has their kind of their wacky stat or their weird thing that went against them, or their tough luck stat they can point to. But the bottom line is, as Bill Parcells, I believe, is credited with, is you are what your record says you are.
Mm-hmm.
And AJ even said that. But I think part of me thinks that they look at it and go, it cannot possibly go against us as much next year as it did this year. Like this, the number, it has to regress back to the mean in some way. And if it does, that's 92 wins just like that. So I don't know how much they're looking at this going, look at what we had on paper here. And this is a brilliant roster. And look at all the superstars that we have. And we really don't need to make a whole lot of changes, versus there's a disconnect somewhere. We got to figure out where that disconnect is, fix the faulty wiring, so we're now firing on all cylinders. I don't know how much motivation there is to truly get into the weeds and figure out what the real deal is and then find a way to fix it, versus going, you look at it on paper, it should work. We were unlucky. Next year we'll be lucky.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of people have said, I know I've said, like, yeah, I mean, you run it back and they win 95 games and nobody would be shocked, because that's what we were expected this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you run the risk of, if there is legitimacy to these issues that have been reported, they're going to come back up at some point. It might not be next year. It might not be the year after that. But it's going to.
Well, we don't care about the year after that. We only care about winning the World Series in 2024.
Right. Yeah.
2025 is way far away.
It'll rear its ugly head at some point. But and they could be completely right about that. And yeah, at one point when AJ was talking about where things went wrong this season, I mean, he's basically like, yeah, the guys didn't play to. I think he said something to the extent of, like, teams that have success, their players play up to their capabilities, and that wasn't the case for us this year. Maybe a bit of an oversimplification, but there's obviously some truth to that. You run the risk, though, of, say you trade Juan Soto, say you don't have the best closer in the game. Certainly not the most versatile and most available closer in the game, but the best closer in the game when he's on the mound. Say you don't have the Cy Young winner, say you don't have Lugo and Martinez and Waka. You have Manny coming off an injury. It's not like it's a perfect deck of cards that you have stacked going in the next season.
Right.
You could also very easily, like, pitching staff struggles, late inning bullpen struggles. Maybe guys aren't hitting again, and you're scuffling. You're a 500-ish baseball team again going into June, and then people are trying to figure out what's wrong, and some of those clubhouse dynamics kind of come up again, because you're not just rolling teams, and there's disagreements on how to handle these situations. So, I would just, what is like one of the great coaching and like athlete cliches: control what you can control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't control this other stuff, as we learned this year. And if that other stuff is like airtight and locked in, and we're all together and feeling good and pulling the same direction, at least you don't have to worry about that. And maybe to some degree that can help you out when things are tough and there's the possibility of things fracturing again. If you don't solidify the foundation, and this is a great opportunity to do so, and maybe there's work being done in the background that we don't know about, but if you don't solidify the foundation, yeah, you can bank on guys hitting 260 with runners in scoring position and being lights out in extra innings, but you can't control that. And so you open yourself up, you make yourself vulnerable to what we saw this year happening again.
And that would be the worst case scenario, is just scuffling along again, not making enough changes, not learning from your mistakes, right? What's the definition of insanity? Continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And that's what scares me, Darnay. That's what scares me about this club, and sometimes the arrogance and hubris that I see from it.
That's a great point. Is there anything else, before we pivot, just that's been rattling around in your head or something you want to get off your chest? Because again, Todd and I had a chance to go through it. I think, having had some time, I think my ultimate conclusion is like, okay, I'm like probably like 85% sure Bob Melvin is back. And I'm like 0% sure that anything's going to be super different, just again, based on what we've heard to this point. Anything else that has been tugging at you just as you've processed all this?
Yeah, the payroll being right around 200 million. We've heard that number thrown out quite a bit. The Atlanta Braves payroll this year was 200 million. So you can build a winner on that. But we'll get into the specifics of who's owed what as we move forward, and options and different players and different types of options for like Martinez and Waka and guys like that, and how it's dramatically different if you hold on to them versus risk them not taking their player option and moving off in free agency, and who can you find, who can you get, who can you trade. And we're still going to hear Shohei Ohtani tied to the Padres at some point in this offseason. It's going to happen. So it's a lot of unknowns. And actually, one name that popped up a lot in that press conference, or the Zoom availability of AJ Preller, that kind of just keeps popping up every time, is Scott Boras, because Scott Boras is the agent for Juan Soto, and Scott Boras is the agent for Blake Snell. And maybe Scott will throw the Padres a little bone for helping him out with the Eric Hosmer contract by saying, here's a package deal, take them both. That would be awesome. It's not going to happen, but that would be awesome if something like that happens. So once again, especially when the Padres are concerned, the person who holds the most power this offseason is going to be the agents up north in Orange County, and it's going to be who has a very good working relationship with the Padres. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of money starts flying around this offseason.
Yeah, a couple things. I'm very interested in what plays out with Blake Snell. I would guess that he's done with the Padres, and I want to say his girlfriend posted on Instagram, like towards the end of the season, like a picture of somewhere in San Diego and said like, we're gonna miss this place or something like that, And so, but he's a guy that the change and transition, that seemed to be tough for him in San Diego, and he's got a good thing going. He always says it's his favorite place to pitch. Seems to have a really good relationship with Ruben Niebla, has a great relationship with Don and Mud, as we know that's the most important thing.
Of course. And those guys can recruit, by the way.
And it's San Diego. So I would think, you might be able to get some sort of like hometown discount with Snell, but I think it would take a huge hometown discount to keep the Dodgers. Are the Mariners going to spend? That's his hometown. Other teams from like really making a run at him. So I think in my mind, he's probably going to go a different direction. But I just wonder how much of that will kind of enter into that conversation when he's sitting down with Scott Boras and AJ Preller, and they try and find some sort of common ground.
It's possible. As we know, literally anything is possible, right?
Yeah. The other thing too, I don't know if you saw Baseball America's projected arbitration salaries for next year. They had Juan Soto at $33 million.
How? I don't, and it's not an affront to Juan Soto. It's Shohei Ohtani got 30 million, and that's the record, the single season record for arbitration. His offensive numbers were on par with, if not better than, Juan Soto's. And oh, by the way, he struck out more than a batter a game and threw 150 something innings, and he got 30 million. So you're going to say that a guy who only plays offense and didn't have the same numbers that Ohtani had is going to get 3 million more? If that's the case, I don't know how arbitration works, and the system is broken.
Yeah. How much is the luxury tax going up from this year? That's, what was it? So it's 237 in 2024. What was it this year? 233. So there's your 4 million for Juan Soto. Maybe it would have been 29, but now it's 33 because the threshold is going up. I don't know how much any of that has to do with it. But I thought that was that's a hefty number. And so something to take into account when they're trying to stay under 200 mil, and you've got one guy tying up a good bit of that. And I think one of the lessons from this year that is not Well, it does kind of go into the dynamics, but indirectly, was roster construction, how we build the team, not being so top heavy. You're a big fan of cross sport analogies. You're no stranger to a good NFL Padres analogy. I was listening
Right.
to Kevin Clark of ESPN. He's got a very good NFL podcast, and he was saying how they're talking about the Jaguars. Jaguars, a team with some talent. I know you expected great things out of the Jags this year. Still early. They could get that done. Trevor Lawrence, a really promising young quarterback. And he was saying, he's like, you know what? I went to a baseball game this year, and it was Padres against the Yankees. And whenever a player from the Padres came up, you'd be like, man, this is like one of the best, most talented young players. He's incredible, this and that. And got all these guys doing incredible things, and turned to my friend. I was like, man, these guys must be awesome. His friend was like, no, they suck. It's like, how does that happen? You know what I mean? And the conversation was about, you have star power, but you can't have a top heavy roster. And just the lesson being like, you just can't leave it up to high end talent. You know, you got to have a balanced squad. And we saw that about the Padres this year. And so, you know, how much does that factor into these decisions, especially as it pertains to somebody like Juan Soto? If you get a hint at, okay, we're just not going to be able to lock him down full term or long term, you know, this is our window now before the trade deadline, you know, when things get a little bit hasty, to, you know, make something happen now and get as much back for him as we possibly can. And maybe in doing so, you don't have, you know, high level Juan Soto, one of the best hitters in the game, but maybe you make improvements across the board. Maybe it's first base, maybe it's in other outfield spots, maybe it's in the rotation, bullpen, what have you. That buoys things a little bit when guys are struggling.
Yes. Soto doesn't turn 25 until the end of October.
It's crazy.
That's wild to think about. Like he's only 2 months older than Fernando Tatis Jr.
Yeah.
2.5, which is, again, crazy to think about. Now, here's the thing. If you look at it in a vacuum with Juan Soto, can you get back in value what Juan Soto gives you just for that offensive production?
Probably
the
not.
defense is terrible for that offensive production. And the answer is probably not. But can he make you a better baseball team? If you can take 3 players that don't, you know, they don't give you the same kind of just sheer OPS numbers that Juan Soto does, but they fill in 2 starting roles that make both of those positions better and give you a better bench option, or maybe a better relief option, a better pitching option, whatever it is. If you're stronger in, if you have Soto, you lose as an A, but then you're taking a couple of C's and making them B pluses. Do you make it up in the aggregate? And that's what the roster construction of this team is going to have to look like next year. Is if you make a deal like that. No, by the way, if you start the season with them, you finish the season with them, because if you trade them mid-season, I mean, something again has gone completely haywire, and it's another disaster, right? So if you start the season with them, you better finish the season with them. You cannot even think about trading him at the trade deadline. So it's got to be up until now, until by spring training, probably, if he's going to be with this team or not. Or you extend him and don't have to worry about it. Can you afford it? That's a whole different conversation for a whole different day. But that's one of the things that you really have to look at because of the top, as you said, the top heavy nature of this roster. You're going to have to find dudes who are, you can't have all A pluses. You got to have some Bs in there. You know, you can win a lot of games with a lot of B ball players if you have also that 4 or 5 or 6 superstar type of team, but then you can't have a bunch of Ds all over the rest of the field. And that's kind of what they had, especially on offense for most of the season. And that's what sunk them.
Definitely. And the other thing too is, like, you're not going to get the value. You're not going to get value back that equals Juan Soto in 2024. But if you don't think you can keep Juan Soto in 2025, 26, 27 and going forward, but then you get pieces that can contribute, you know, then that takes a little bit out of it. If you're able to get guys that are like dudes for you for at least a handful of years, that are contributors, that are, maybe there's a guy that ends up being like an all-star caliber or 2 type player. Again, it's not Juan Soto, but it's like good, you know, useful ball players that you have for 3, 4, 5 years, as opposed to like one superstar generational talent that you have for one more year. I mean, at this point, like
that's like saying, like, listen, it's like one of the reasons that Alan Trammell was kept out of the Hall of Fame for so long was, well, he's not Ozzie Smith. There is no other Ozzie Smith. His only crime was playing at the same time that Ozzie Smith played. I would take Alan Trammell on my day, my team every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So if you're talking about, well, he's not Juan Soto. How many Juan Sotos are there? Yeah. It's like, well, you know what? Hey, he's not Patrick Mahomes. Oh, by the way, he's Josh Allen. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Especially if you get maybe he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's Trevor Lawrence, and you're also getting Calvin Ridley and an offensive line. You know what I mean?
Josh Allen, the defensive Josh Allen, and exactly.
Throw Jamal Agnew in there as well. So it's at this point, it's probably going to be.
We know way too much about the Jaguars roster, Darnay. Way too much.
Devin Lloyd. Let's throw Devin Lloyd in there. Is Cam Robinson still playing for them? I can't keep track. Yeah. Anyways, it's at this point, it's probably going to be seen as did the Padres win the trade? It's tough. It did help them get to an NLCS, and that's great. But if they're having to cut bait at this year, it's going to be one of those things where the folks that are and remain critical and skeptical of that deal, it's going to it's not going to quiet down their opinions on the matter. If you end up with him for a year and a half and the full season you have, while he was good, you didn't get a lot out of it team wide. Derek, how are we feeling about the Dodgers? What's your Dodgers take?
I would still be the dog. I'd take the Dodgers run in San Diego. I know a lot of people were saying today, like, well, at least we're not the Dodgers. I guarantee you no Dodgers fans are saying, well, I'd rather be the Padres. They still have had an unprecedented run of success. They still have had an unbelievable ability to dominate the division and get to the postseason. I will never comprehend what happens with this team in the postseason. I was talking to Fernando a little bit ago. Like, this is the year that you actually can write it off as like, okay, I can see why they lost in the division series, because they lost Dustin May, injury. They lost Walker Buehler, injury. Clayton Kershaw turned old overnight in his start. And, you're relying on guys like Bobby Miller. Julio Urias proved once again that he's a terrible human being. So you lose all this starting pitching, and you come in against a team that's that hot like the Diamondbacks were. This is the one where you look at and go, okay, I get it. This is not all that big a surprise. But when it comes at the tail end of a decade of frustration in the playoffs, you just have to look at it as, damn, what is wrong with this team in the postseason? So I almost look at this one like okay, give them a flyer on that one. If it happens again next year, now you've got serious fundamental issues with the entire organization.
Well,
there's no reason for this to keep happening.
When you were talking about potential landing spots for Bob Melvin, you did say the Dodgers.
If they get rid of Doc Roberts, that's not a smart move. He is a hell of a skipper. His players love him. I don't think it's a man. I couldn't. One of the things I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you what I don't think it is, and I don't think it's a managerial issue. I really don't. It's his teams are always ready to go. This one was weird because especially after the Diamondbacks took that lead on Lance Lynn, you see how tight that team looked? Like, even when they made a little rally and scored a couple runs, it was still almost like in the dugout, like, can we cheer? Is this yay? Are we okay yet? I don't know. Like, there was it's like the confidence just leaves. And I don't understand how that happens.
Do you see the Tommy Pham quote? Our old friend Tommy Pham. Tommy Pham on his reactions to the home runs. This is from Theo Mackey on Twitter. Damo got one, and I was like, hell yeah. Marte crushed one. I was like, hell yeah. Seawalk blasted one, and I'm like, damn. Then Moreno hit the foul ball, and I'm like, damn. Very next pitch, he blasted one. I'm like, hell yeah. It's the greatest quote. Greatest quote. And like, you can hear Tommy Pham's voice. I love it. Maybe Tommy Pham will get cheered now.
Club aficionado Tommy Pham.
Maybe he'll get cheered now in San Diego because of what's happened. Okay, you get one team's 2-year run. The Padres, the Dodgers, last 2 years.
Last 2 years?
Do the right thing, Derek. Do the right thing.
I know I'm one who usually will err on the side of what's the spectacular moment. So give me the Padres because they went to an NLCS and they beat the Dodgers in the postseason. So you can have your couple of 100 wins and your franchise record wins for a year. I will take the better moments. So give me the Padres over the last 2 years.
That's big for you because you're not one to pander, and so I know that's you really mean that,
Oh yeah, I would. If you give me a chance to go to a National League Championship Series and to knock you out in person, and then the next year the other team doesn't get any further than they got the previous year, give me the farther playoff run. The playoffs are what matter. Give me the playoff run. Give me the moments. I heard you on the album with Darren the other day talking about who would you rather have, Madison Bumgarner or Clayton Kershaw's career. And for that, it boils down to me like immediately Madison Bumgarner.
Yeah.
Without blinking. Because Clayton Kershaw's won 3 Cy Young Awards and an MVP. What year did that happen in?
Oh,
nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, nobody knows. Madison Bumgarner's dominance over the Royals in the World Series. What year did that happen in?
Well, that was 2014.
See, you remember the moment. Madison Bumgarner had the biggest career moment between those two, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
He won almost single-handedly a World Series. I will take that career because it involves that week of what he did. I will take that over an entire career of Clayton Kershaw's any day.
The other thing too is Mad Bum hasn't been like a scrub either. It's not like he was a scrub during the regular season, throwing up like 5 ERAs year after year and then being lights out in the postseason. Like he's done enough aside from the postseason to be like, okay, yeah, this is a guy who's had a really good run. And so I think that makes it a little bit easy. And I'm with you. I think my first gut kind of instinct was leaning towards Mad Bum there, even though like he's not going to be in kind of like the all-time great top tier conversation that Clayton Kershaw has put himself in. Last couple minutes, have you followed the Orlando Arcia stuff?
A little bit.
And I just come on a
little bit. Yeah, I know the basics. Yes.
Yeah. So you're like, as an experienced like clubhouse locker room reporter, at some point when reporters media was in the clubhouse of the Braves, Arcia, after what was it, game 2, was saying attaboy Harper in earshot of reporters. Wasn't directly to somebody, but is when reporters were in the room, and I guess there weren't cameras rolling, otherwise we probably would have heard it. But as you know, like there's times where we're walking in, we're waiting for somebody, cameras aren't rolling, we're just kind of waiting to talk to somebody. But those moments, like the clubhouse is open. And so from Orlando's standpoint, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or what. You could also put this on Atlanta's PR media relations staff. They need to make it clear when reporters are in the room and we open it up, everything is open. Okay. Unless you specifically say to a reporter, hey, like I'd appreciate if this were off the record. But it defaults to things are on the record and anything that's said and done can be reported. And the other thing too is I'm sure this has happened at Padres. I want to say I remembered from when I covered Gonzaga, when they would let us in the locker room after the game, you'd hear somebody say, reporters coming in. And part of that might be because there might be naked in front of their locker, you know what I mean? So they might want to cover themselves up. But the other thing too is if you're goofing off, having a good time saying something, okay, I need to kind of cool out here because the writers and the cameras are in, and I don't want to say anything, knowing that whatever I say here is for public consumption. So that's my piece.
Without going off on a long-winded tangent, I agree with everything you just said. It is when the clubhouse is open, it is fair game. Now, there does have to be some kind of if somebody's at their locker, and I've seen this multiple times. Somebody's at their locker, they're frustrated, they start dropping F-bombs, they throw something, they break something. That's a moment of frustration that you're like, okay, you know what? You'll let that go. Some stuff's got to stay in the clubhouse. If it's something that's celebratory like that, and they know for sure, like if it happened before the clubhouse opened and everybody's standing outside and then you hear it through the door,
Right.
then you don't say that.
Yeah.
You say, hey, wow, they are rocking, really being raucous in there. That's a really happy club, but you don't get into specifics.
Yeah.
Because that's not something that you were meant to hear, and that's not something that you were supposed to be eligible to hear. Clubhouse open, yes, all of that is available to be reported. And there are a lot of things that I've seen in locker rooms and clubhouses that I've sat on because, like, you know what? That's not my place. I understand what you're doing. I understand the frustration. Don't worry about it. We're good. Something like that, yeah, of course that's going to get out there because that is a raw emotional response, and B, something that somebody else is going to have and is going to start getting out there, and it's going to be a big deal. And you'd better not have your news director calling and saying, were you not around when this happened? Like, sometimes you need to CYA and make sure that you are accurately sharing everything that's going on in that place.
Yeah. I remember when I was covering Washington State, the press conference room where I'd often go during halftime to like edit things or whatever, to warm up if it's a cool night, was right off their locker room. And so you could hear every so often things that were being said. I remember one time, like, Mike Leach was like, I want to say there was a spirited conversation going on. I think it was a game that he wasn't too thrilled, and none of us in that room would report what was said because we weren't supposed to hear that. And he doesn't know that we're in the next room and that sort of thing. And so there are those kind of boundaries there. But in those open settings, as Travis Darnay said, like, it's not a sanctuary. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not what it is. It's, and I lost my train of thought, but there's like Atlanta reporters like, oh, we've built up this trust and, we have national guys coming in here and they don't have the same. No, that's not how it works. They might have a different perspective. But the rules are the same for everyone. And when the clubhouse is open and when things are being said, they are fair to report. And
Correct.
Braves are not handling the situation very well. And I know we responded to your friend Tony, who's given it up for Auburn against LSU this weekend. So,
yep, War Eagle. The question: can Auburn beat LSU in Baton Rouge? Yes. Will they? Let's pump the brakes on that. I'm not so sure. There we go, Tony. Yeah, I'm hoping, man. I'm hoping. Always, that's the thing about being an Auburn fan is you go into something with expectation that it's not going to work out, and then you get really happy if it does.
Any final thoughts? I know you got to get out of here.
Can't wait to see what this whole thing looks like.
Yeah,
it's going to be like, love watching playoff baseball. By the way, what has Bruce Bochy done to Texas? Rooting like crazy for Boch right now. I've thrown all my weight behind the Texas Rangers because, damn, they are playing. They've done this without Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. They've won 5 straight playoff games.
Yeah.
What Boch has done there is truly phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's that's kind of the other thing I'm looking at is going, man, if he goes out and gets a 4th after leaving this club, it'll hurt, but dude, yeah, do it. Show everybody how great you are. Reestablish your first ballot Hall of Fame candidacy, Boch. That's really fun to watch. But when it comes to the Padres, it's going to be a lot of big questions. I want to see first off whose options are picked up, whose options are denied, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, you reminded me of something. I'm also curious, coaching staff. Like, are there any changes with the coaching staff? Because Preller hinted at, like, hey, we have guys that we have a lot of confidence in that we like, but seem to leave the opening that there could be some changes there. So that's the next thing I'm kind of curious about. And we're glad, Tony's keeping the faith. Good show, guys. Appreciate y'all's work and insight. Pods will be back stronger next year. That's what we love to hear. Love the confidence.
There we go.
Tony.
Let's leave it on that because you know what? I tend to agree.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.